Let's look at how we can solve this quadratic equation using the method of completing the square. So remember, when we're using completing the square, our goal is to rewrite this in the form x with some number squared equal to just a constant. So x plus or minus a number, that whole quantity being squared, equal to just a number. So something we notice when we look at this one, our value of a, the number in front of the x squared term, is not equal to 1. So before we can start using our strategies that we've seen previously, we need to divide everything by our value of a, which in this case is our 4. So we're going to rewrite this equation as, so 4x squared divided by 4 is just x squared. 6x divided by 4, I'm going to reduce the 6/4 and write that as 3/2 x, minus 9/4, 0 divided by 4. It's still 0. So because it's an equation, as long as we divide by the same value on both sides of the equal sign, then we still have an equation with equivalent solutions. So as we've done before, we're going to go ahead and move this constant to the other side. So we have x squared plus 3/2 x. I'm going to leave a space to find my new constant is equal to 9/4. So we look at the number that's in front of the x. It's a positive 3/2. So we're going to do 2 steps. We're going to divide by 2. So we're going to take 3/2 and divide by 2. Dividing by 2 is like multiplying by a half. So we have 3/4. Then we're going to take that value and square it. So 3/4 squared. 3 squared is 9 and 4 squared is 16. So the constant that we're going to add on each side is 9/16. Definitely let your calculator help you as you're doing some simplifying here with the fractions. It's fine to use technology to assist with that. So looking at the left-hand side, we now want to take this trinomial and factor. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to 9/16 but add to 3/2. And our hint was that it's always going to work out to be that same value that we had when we divided by 2. We had 3/4. So let's check that. If you put a 3/4 here on each side, if we check that with foiling, we'd have our x times x to get our x squared. 3/4 x plus 3/4 x would be 6/4 x. 6/4 is 3/2. 3/4 times 3/4 is 9/16. So it will always work out that this value is the same as the value that you had when you divided by 2. That becomes especially helpful when you have fractions like this to factor with. So we can rewrite our equation in the form x plus 3/4 quantity squared. 9/4 plus 9/16, let your calculator help you with that, is 45/16. So we've gotten our equation into that form that we said was our goal at the beginning, x plus or minus a number squared equal to just a constant. So at this point we can use our square root property. We're going to take the square root of each side of our equation. So the square root of x plus 3/4 squared is plus or minus the square root of 45/16. So we have our x plus 3/4 because the square root and the square cancel out, plus or minus the square root of 45/16. So we want to do a little bit of work to clean that up. When you have a fraction inside of a radical like that, you can think of the numerator and the denominator separately. So I'm going to think about the square root of 45 and think about the square root of 16. Well, the denominator is a little bit easier to work with here because 16 is a perfect square. It's 4 times 4, so the square root of 16 is just 4. Looking at the numerator, 45, I want to think about whether any perfect squares divide into 45, and 9, 3 squared, divides into 45. So I'm going to think of this as the square root of 9 times the square root of 5. 9 times 5 is 45. So the square root of 9 is just 3. 5 is not a perfect square, so it stays inside of the radical. We have 3√5 all over 4. So coming back to our equation, we've got x plus 3/4 is equal to plus or minus 3 root 5 all over 4, and then we'll just go ahead and subtract the 3/4 from both sides. So we can write our final answer as x equals negative 3/4 plus or minus 3 root 5 all over 4. So this one we had an extra step at the beginning because our value of a was not equal to 1. So because it was a 4x squared, before we could start completing the square, we needed to divide every single term in our equation by 4. That left us with a lot of fractions to deal with. So we can follow the same process whether we have integers or fractions. So we divide by 4. And then we look at the number in front of the x, divide by 2, and then square to get our equation into that format of a quantity squared equal to just a constant. Using the square root property, we take the square root of each side and then work to simplify to get x on one side by itself.